This is a quick walkthrough from the H6 Zoom recorder. This is a new tool from the Cage, or that's available at the Cage. We'll walk through the sort of physical attributes and then go into the menus a little bit and talk about basic setup for this. So first of all, let's turn it over. You have your 4 AA batteries. This thing wants to eat through batteries. The Cage is going to, keep these supplied for you, but it's a good idea to have at least 4 AA batteries with you in the field. So should you need them, you have them available to you. Get those immediately so you can keep them in your grip kit or your camera bag or whatever. So when you're out in the field, you don't run out of battery life. On the back, you also have a 1/4-20 here, so you can mount this onto different grip equipment or onto a tripod or wherever you might need to if it's appropriate to mount these, if you don't have somebody just holding it, monitoring the whole time. There's also an onboard speaker here, so if you are not using headphones and you want to hear playback, you can do that, but it's terrible. And it's better than nothing, but you're much better off using headphones to both monitor and then play back to make sure everything sounds, as good as you can make it in the field. All right, so let's turn this over, and we'll go over the sort of the top half and then turn it on its sides and go from there. So on this H6 Zoom recorder, you have an X and a Y, or a left and a right channel for these onboard mics. And the onboard microphone is really great for sort of general conversation or for recording room tone or room noise. It works nicely for that for the most part. And I would just suggest that if you are doing an actual video production, that you're using the appropriate microphone, which in our class, and typically is probably going to be a lavalier mic, a lapel mic, or a shotgun mic positioned, either one positioned properly for the sort of audio that you're trying to record. These onboard mics, though, have 2 different settings. You can set them to a 90-degree kind of angle of view, and then a 120-degree angle of view. And you will hear a difference because of, depending upon the space that you're in, obviously, but you'll hear a difference between sort of the not-so-wide angle, 90-degree, and the more, the wider swath recording of the 120-degree. From there, you have a physical dial here. And this dial or pot is going to allow you to control the input level of the individual channel. So this dial controls the input of this. These dials control the input of your different left and your different right channels, right? So setting this, I'm going to set this to maybe 5 or 6 or 7, I don't know, just leave it up. And then each one of these channels, you would adjust the individual levels of based upon the tone that you're trying to achieve there. Now, underneath and above your different physical dials, there's also an attenuator. So this is a digital attenuator, and what these little toggles do is they kind of act like neutral density. I'll relate it to neutral density in photography. It cuts the signal that's coming through the system. So most of the time you're going to want that pad setting to the left, and if for some reason the signal that's coming through a particular channel is too loud, you can turn on your neutral density and it's going to cut by 20 decibels. So that's a good way to do that. Or if for some reason you're setting these dials and you can't get the right level, it's not loud enough for you, what is likely happening is that the pad is set on and you want it off. You want it on 0 so that you're not losing that signal. Now, turning the Zoom recorder on its side, let's take a look at the left side here. On the left, you have 2 different channels with an XLR input and then also a 1/4-inch input. So your XLR input looks like this. That's your sort of standard microphone XLR input for what we're doing and what we use, but you can also plug in a 1/4-inch input jack there. Looks like a much larger headphone jack, basically. Underneath that is your SD card holder. There's a 16 gig SD card in there right now, formatted for the Zoom recorder so that we write the files properly. Underneath underneath the SD card, we have the input for your headphone monitors, as well as the volume for your monitor, or the volume for your headphones. The volume of your headphones does not affect the gain of your recording. It just is the output of your the actual audio, right? And what that means is that you can't trust the loudness that you're hearing for your audio recording. You just use the volume up and down to get to a comfortable level, so when you're monitoring your audio and you're listening to what's happening around the space and for your talent, you know when there's extraneous noises like an airplane going or construction noises or a refrigerator in the background or whatever. This is how you would monitor the audio, so you kind of know what's going on. You trust your audio gain levels using the decibel meter, which we'll take a look at in a couple minutes. All right, so let's turn this on. The on switch is on the left side of the Zoom recorder. Press it sort of downward towards the power. It will turn on. Once you've got all of your settings set, you can also set this to hold, and then the hold setting is basically just going to not allow you to change any settings, and you might do this if you are recording a very long take and you don't want to accidentally hit a dial or change something, anything like that. Okay, so I'm going to, you might not want the hold on very often, and maybe you do, I guess it depends on the situation, but if for some reason you go to make a change to a setting and it's not taking that change, check this and make sure that the hold is not on, because that's going to prohibit you from being able to make any changes. All right, so let's turn this over to the right side. On the right side of the Zoom recorder, you've got your two other channels. These are your right side channels. You can also see another mic input that's up at the top here, so you could actually plug in a different kind of microphone that you might use. We don't use this. I'm going to suggest that you use an XLR input, but this is an auxiliary input for a kind of headphone, or I'm sorry, a kind of microphone that is sort of like a little headphone jack microphone. Okay, so from there you have a menu button. So this is how you actuate the menu itself. And then the way that you change settings in the menu is you use this little dial, which will push up or push down, and then is also a button, so you can press it. So you can adjust up and down and then actually press that as a button. And then there's a USB system. This USB does not charge. What the USB does is it allows you to offload your data or change firmware if for some reason you need to update firmware, which you'll never have to do with a Cage piece of equipment because the Cage does it for you. But anyways, you might use that to offload your data if for some reason you don't have an SD card reader. You can use that. You just have to go to the menu and go to the USB setting and tell the software to do that. So it's not that easy to do, but you can do it. Okay, so let's get into our sort of standard buttons that you're going to see on any recorder for the most part, and that is the ability to turn on your different channels. So here's your L and your R. And then here are your individual channels as well. So you want to turn on channel number 1, you hit that button, and now my upper left channel is on. Channel 2, channel 3, channel 4, you can see the corresponding numbers next to it. As I've turned on L and R, you can actually see the decibel meter sort of bouncing around. You're going to adjust your gain to get the exact decibel readout that you want. And again, what you're after is you typically want that decibel meter to never go above -6, or really never go above -6, because then you risk blowing out the audio, and should bounce probably between -18 and -6. Usually it's -20 and -6, but yeah. So the buttons that you have on the top here are a stop, play, rewind, fast forward, and a record. To make a recording, you just hit the record button once. You can see that little red light has turned on. You can see the square, stop. You can see the indicator that is a square when we are not recording is square, indicating that we're not recording, plus record, and now we are recording. You can see the runtime changing as well as we record our seconds, minutes, and hours for our runtime. More things to sort of take heed of. You have the folder in which this file is being written to, because these Zoom recorders are going to generate 10 folders when you format your SD card, and it will automatically start with folder number 1, but you can adjust that, and you might do that if you're going to be recording audio all day and you have different interviews or different spaces that you're going to record with or record in. You might change folders based upon your different situation, your different workflow, and you'd want to note that in your show notes when you're recording your when you're actually in the field and your producer is paying attention to your different file formats and different files and so on. Anyways, the name of your file is here, so this is Zoom 007, and then we have our battery readout, and then if we skip down underneath our decibel meter here, you have your file format, the hertz rate that you're recording at, and then the bit rate that you're recording at. And typically, so by default, these are going to be set to wave, 44.1 and 16 bits. That's what you're going to want to work within. So you want your wave file as opposed to MP3. We are going to work at either 44.1 or 48 kilohertz, 48 kilohertz, and that is based upon video standards, and it is also based upon if you are recording to a camera, and that camera has a sort of a default kilohertz setting, you just want to match this to whatever your camera is recording its audio at, in case you need to mix the onboard audio with this audio. You kind of want to just make sure those things are parallel with each other, or the same. And then your bit rate is 24 right now. We'll talk about that in this menu setting. We also have our record runtime. So right now we have 16 hours, 13 minutes, and 20 seconds of space left on our SD card. If you change your file format, you will get different amounts of time, because those file formats will take up more or less space depending upon that decision. This is also your decibel meter here, and obviously your decibel meter, you're going to want to bounce between -6 and -20, as we talked about. To the left of that, there are a couple other settings. There's a low pass setting, a comp, and I don't know what the comp is, to be honest with you. I've never used that setting. And then the phantom power. The little lightning bolt there stands for phantom power. None of those settings are on. Probably won't be using those settings, although you may use a low pass filter because that cuts out some of the lower frequencies, which can be useful for spoken word recording. So you might actually find yourself using a low pass filter. All right, so we've covered that stuff. Let's click on the menu button. So we'll hit menu. This brings us into menu. You can see we can adjust which folder we're writing to by going into our folders. We can go into our input and output. And I think the important tools that we want to know are the record format. So if you go into the little red dot, stands for record, and you go to record format, these are where you can choose the different recording formats that you want to deal with. And again, you want to match the hertz rate, that number 48 or 41, to other audio recording devices that you're going to be using. You're probably just typically going to use either 48 or 41 kilohertz. It pertains to the dynamic range, basically, that you can record. The Wave 96K 24-bit is going to yield you the highest quality file, but it's going to be a much larger file, and therefore it's going to take up more space on your SD card and also in your hard drive when you're archiving your data. And honestly, the 16 or 24-bit at 44.1 kilohertz is one of the major standards for video recording, so you're probably fine with either of these two, but you want to base that upon other devices that you're recording with. So I'm going to set this back to 24-bit. Let's hit the menu button, which is going to bring us back into our menu. I don't think we need to worry about any of those other settings, so we'll hit menu again. I just want to show you some of the sort of important settings that you might want to use more often than not. The factory reset, so going into the system, that little gear there, if we hit that, when you check this out from the cage, if it seems like somebody's been messing around with it, or there's weird settings, or you just want to start fresh, go into the system and do a factory reset. And that is going to help mitigate any weird settings that might be on, because the person before you who checked this out was using it for a very specific purpose, and they set it up for that purpose, and it's different than what you need. As you get the Zoom recorder, and before you even take any levels or make any recordings, you want to set up your SD card, and to do that you go into the SD card section, and you're probably just going to format it, and that's going to set this card up for success for recording. I think those are all the settings that you need to know. Again, to actually start the recording, you literally just hit the record button. You'll see the runtime start. With your headphones plugged in, you'll hear the monitor, and you'll be able to make adjustments to the different channels based upon whatever channel you're using for your audio recording. And that's a general walkthrough of the Zoom H6 handy recorder.